Good evening and welcome to Perigo. I'm Lindsay Perigo and I'm dangerous. Perigo is Portuguese for danger, and I seek to be a danger to the enemies of life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Tonight I want to endanger democracy. Democracy, you say? But isn't that the same as liberty? No, it is not. Democracy can place liberty at the mercy of morons and cannibals. Under democracy, individual rights can be voted away. Winston Churchill once said that the best argument against democracy was a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. These days, the average voter couldn't even sustain a 5-minute conversation. Government, education, and the culture it has engendered have combined to make the mob unprecedentedly dumb, not to mention sullenly dependent. But still, they have the vote. How democracy currently works can be summed up in 7 P words. Power-lusting politicians promise to plunder the productive to pay parasites. Politicians are interested in one thing only: power. To get power in a democracy, they must garner votes. To get votes in a democracy like ours, steeped in hatred for the productive, they must make promises to the unproductive. They strive to outbid each other with money stolen from the productive. Elections become, as H.L. Mencken observed, advance auctions of stolen goods. Politicians, said Nikita Khrushchev, who knew, are the same the world over. They promise bridges everywhere, even where there are no rivers. Not for nothing are politicians regarded as among the lowest of life forms. They are. There are exceptions, of course, and there is a role for politicians, honest ones, in a free and civilised society. Legalised thievery and thuggery are not part of that role. What is? Well, that'll be one of the questions I'll pursue with my guest tonight. For now, I want you to hold this thought, one of Thomas Jefferson's. Whenever a man has cast a longing eye on office, a rottenness begins in his conduct. The same Thomas Jefferson observed, a democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. What is right is no more a matter of numbers than what is true. It's not democracy we should seek, it's liberty, freedom, individual rights, with democracy entirely subordinate to them. Exactly what America's founding fathers intended. America was never conceived as a democracy, but as a constitutional republic. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we should be. And that's the Peritorial. Next, someone who thinks the answer to the problems of democracy is more democracy. Muriel Newman, former Deputy Leader of the ACT Party and now Principal of the New Zealand Centre for Political Research, will be my guest when Perigo returns. Welcome back to Perigo and welcome to my guest this week, the Principal of the New Zealand Centre for Political Research, former ACT Deputy Leader Muriel Newman. NZCPR, Muriel.
.com.
It sounds, .com, yes, okay. Get in the plug right from the start. May as well start as you mean to go on. But it sounds like resuscitation, I thought to myself when I was rehearsing this. And then I thought, in a way, that is what you're seeking to achieve, isn't it? A resuscitation of democratic values in our political life.
Look, I spent 9 years in Parliament, and when I came out I sort of thought, well, what can I do to actually try to enhance democracy, to enhance the way that the system works here in New Zealand? And I thought a think tank would be the right way to go for me. And so yes, I do my weekly newsletters, put a burst of politics and public policy out into the arena, and a lot of people engage in the debate. And so, yes, in a way it is resuscitating democracy.
Well, you send it to me and, what, 19,999
Yeah, we're almost
others?
at 20,000.
And I can assure our viewers it is very worthwhile and thought-provoking. Obviously, one is not going to agree with everything in it, but you wouldn't expect that.
No, that's right. And I try to bring in a guest contributor every week.
I believe I've been that once or twice myself.
You have been that once or twice, yes. And people who can add something to the issue that we're talking about.
Well, one of your big things at the moment is your campaign to reinstate democracy. And I think this might be one of the areas where you and I would part company. Not that I don't think what you're proposing is a good idea, but that it misses the point. And I made the point in my peritorial that it's not democracy that's the thing, it's individual rights, and they must be placed beyond the vote, exactly as the American founding fathers intended them to be. And I know we had this conversation before you came in here on camera. Do you take that point on board?
Oh, look, I take the point on board, but the biggest threat to individual rights in a country like New Zealand is big government. I mean, at the moment you've got so many bureaucrats, if you like, at central government and local government level who are making laws and regulations that constrain all of us and what we can do in our ordinary lives, that you suddenly get the feeling that we are not free at all. And so reducing government, limiting government, actually I think is a very, very valid thing to do.
Yeah, but if you put all that power back in the hands of the majority that you want to do, New Zealanders are fans of big government. You'll get more of it, and that's exactly my point.
No, I think that you misunderstand the concept. The concept is simply that we have a parliamentary democracy, and it's a representative democracy. So in general, our members of parliament do represent the views of the public, but occasionally they go off the rails, and probably more occasionally than we like to think. And the point is that there are no checks and balances for the public when that happens. And I mean, the classic one in recent times was the smacking law, where the government of the day forced it through with basically the support of almost all of Parliament. And yet the public were absolutely horrified by this new law. And if we'd have had checks and balances in place, then we could have actually done something about it.
Well, what you're seeking in particular is that after legislation in that category is passed, the public will have the power to overturn it if they can garner enough signatures for a referendum which will be binding, unlike
That's
the ones
right.
that we hold at the moment.
Yeah.
And so probably, yes, the anti-smacking law would...
It's like a people's veto, so it would only be enacted occasionally, but whenever a government just shoves something through, rams it through against the views of the public, then the public actually have recourse. They can say, right, let's go for a people's veto. Whether it succeeds or not, that's a separate issue. At least there is an opportunity then to rein in the government.
Well, here's a case in point. You see, if that had been in place in 1986 when homosexual acts between consenting adults were decriminalised, if you'd had such a referendum then, retrospectively, it would have overturned the law and recriminalised homosexuality, and that would be a violation of individual rights.
I think though that we tend to underestimate the wisdom of the public as a whole. It's like the wisdom of the crowds. If people are really well informed about the issues, in general they come to the right answers. Now sometimes they haven't been given enough information and sometimes they need more time, but in general you have to say to yourself, do you trust the public as a whole, an informed public as a whole, or do you trust individuals? And I think over recent times we find that there are occasions where you can't actually trust your representatives
many times, we know that.
because they're actually operating for different reasons. They're doing it for political reasons instead of what's good for the country.
Power lust, as I said in
Yes,
my
that's
peritorial.
true.
But I'm sure I don't need to remind you that the Nazis were initially voted into power before Hitler said, well, no more elections. They were voted in. Not with a majority, but a plurality, which is what we have here now with MMP. So again, if you don't have safeguards in place for individual rights, your majority or your plurality can destroy them.
Oh, look, safeguards are really important, but I'm looking at the other side of it. What do you do when a government passes laws and under MMP this is happening more often, where the minority parties are pushing through laws which are then put onto the whole country, probably against the wishes of the whole country in general. What do you do? And whether you succeed with a public veto, as I said, that is a separate issue, but at least you have a chance of reining in a government if you think it's gone off the rails.
Now, and you think it went off the rails, this government went off the rails with its new foreshore and seabed legislation, or what's it called, the Marine and
Coastal Area Bill
Act. And you think that your citizens or people's veto, if it were enforced now, would be able to overturn that?
Yes.
But what is so bad about this legislation? As it's presented, it's designed to give Māori just the right to go to court to see if they have a case to be heard. It doesn't mean the case is going to be favourably concluded upon. It just gives them the right to do that. And I would have thought that ACT, being the party of the principles of justice and private property, would go along with that.
Well, that's ACT, and I'm me, first of all. And what we said to ourselves was, first of all, did the Foreshore and Seabed Act 2004 give Māori the opportunity to go to court? And the answer was yes. You couldn't get any rights under the previous act unless you went to court. And we were horrified by the fact that this half-truth was being touted everywhere, that in fact Māori had been denied their day in court. It was not true. Under the Foreshore and Seabed Act, you could only get a right by going to the High Court. Under the present law that's just been enacted, you don't have to go to court. This is the bizarre thing. You can do it by secret negotiation with a minister. So they've actually gone from a situation where everyone had to go to court to a situation now where they don't have to go to court, and they're pretending that it's giving the day in court. I mean, it's bizarre.
As I understand it, most of the time you do have to go to court, and the secret negotiations with the minister would be invoked only on a few occasions, which he has asked us to trust us upon.
No.
But you're saying that's not the case?
That's not the case, and he agreed with what I've said in Parliament one day when he was asked about the number of people who would do direct negotiation and the number of people who would end up in court. And he explained that most people would do it by direct negotiation, and it's only if they got turned down that they would probably apply to the High Court.
And what's wrong with that? If they have a case, why shouldn't it be heard? And why shouldn't there be favourable adjudication on it at the end of the day if the case is strong? And why shouldn't parts of the foreshore revert to people who used them a long time ago, admittedly, but undoubtedly had what now we would consider gave them the rights of ownership?
Well, I think it comes back to what you consider to be a public commons in New Zealand. And certainly most New Zealanders would think that the air we breathe, our water, our beaches and our sea, and especially the territorial sea, which is part of our national defence network, and also where people, you know, make their living, and which allows trade and all sorts of things, they would consider that to be part of a public commons. And so the question is, if it's always been held by the Crown, which it has since 1840 under common law, then you have to say to yourself, well, what is it that changed it? And of course it goes back to that 2003 Court of Appeal case where the judges said that there might be some customary title left in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. They said it would be rare and remote and hard to prove. And so then you have to say, well, what did the Labour government in 2004 do? They allowed for Māori to take a claim to court to actually get a management right over the foreshore and seabed that they thought they owned, and also to seek compensation. And all of that was a very settled law. What they've done now under the Marine and Coastal Area Act is that they've actually opened the whole coast up for claims. So they've lowered the bar on the claims, and so instead of just rare and remote areas going, there's a good chance over time that essentially a lot of the coast will be claimed as private property of iwi.
So, and you think the effects of this legislation ultimately will be that we will be denied access to the beaches?
Well, they've got in there, of course, in the law, they say that access is guaranteed and it's free and all the rest of it. But look, we've seen how tribes work, and all you have to do is look at the case on the Coromandel, where one tribal group took over a boat ramp there. The dispute went on for 6 months. The police wouldn't do anything, the council wouldn't do anything. The people involved, their businesses were virtually destroyed, and the locals couldn't use the boat ramp, and it was all over the foreshore and seabed. So the point is that the police are not keen to actually try and bring tribal groups who decide to flout the law into line, and so we've got a law, sure, but will it be upheld? Who knows?
It's interesting, fascinating in fact, the difference in perception, because you just said this legislation lowers the bar, but the opponents of it, like Hone Harawira, say no, it raises the bar unacceptably high, and that's why they've opposed it. Who's right?
Oh, look, you have to go and have a look at the Maori Party briefing paper. They are very clear there that the bar was lowered from what it was under the 2004 Act. The Minister has said it hasn't been lowered, but it has. You just have to look at the various criteria. Each one of them has been relaxed. And so instead of only one tribe, remember under the 2004 Act, only Ngāti Porou put in a claim during the 6 years. And under this Act, they say something like 1/10 of the coastline will become privately owned by different tribal groups. So that's 2,000 kilometres. So of course the bar is lowered. And the Maori Party have said this is not the end, this is the beginning, that they will work on future governments to lower the bar further. So there we go.
You pounced on me before when I associated you with ACT, and you said that's ACT and I'm me. Is it a case of ne'er the twain meet these days? What is your relationship?
No, it's simply that once I left Parliament in 2005 and set up the Centre for Political Research, then I had to be independent. So I had to cut any ties that I had with a political party. Of course, I still know the ACT MPs and I still subscribe to many of the views. But in terms of a close relationship, I don't have one with them. I've spoken at a couple of conferences and that's about it. But what I get, Lindsay, because I speak to so many people every week through my newsletter, I get people who accuse me all the time, why don't you guys do this or that or the other? And I have to say to them, hang on, I haven't actually been a member of Parliament since 2005, so it is a mistake that people make all the time.
Are you a member of the ACT Party?
No.
You're not?
No.
Will you support the ACT Party?
Oh, look, I will support whoever puts forward the best agenda or recipe, if you like, for New Zealand. And it's the same decision that you have to make and all of us have to make at every election. And in the meantime, what I try to do is to raise issues that I think are of concern for us all to think about. And particularly when there's public policy matters, like at the moment, for example, there's a review of the emissions trading scheme going on. It closes, I think, next week. So my newsletter this weekend will be about the emissions trading scheme, so people have got some information so they can put in a review with a little bit more knowledge than they might have had originally if they want to put in a submission on the review.
Well, there you go, trying to steer me away from the subject of ACT, and I suspect it's a little uncomfortable for you because, as you know, there have been a lot of rumours about your possible association with an alternative, in inverted commas, right-wing party. Can you lay those to rest or confirm them or tell us just exactly what you're up to behind the scenes?
Look, first of all, with ACT, I mean, they've obviously gone through some really difficult times, and, you know, you can point the finger at a number of issues that have caused that. But there is a real worry that after the election, they will only get a very small percentage of the vote if they're there at all. And so you'll end up with the National Party having to rely again on the Maori Party, and so we get more laws like the Foreshore and seabed law coming through. So there's a very big worry from people who are centre-right voters of where do they go. And there is no one else at the present time. So there has been talk for a long time about the idea of a centre-right party. But look, the point is, until you've got the commitment from people, until you've got the money, and of course it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort to form a party, as I know from my time in ACT, it is all talk. So at the moment there is nothing certain, And but a lot of people would like to see something.
Are you involved with Reform NZ?
No, not at all.
No. Do you have a view on what they're trying to do?
No, I mean I've looked at their website. Like there's a few other little parties too that have formed. That everyone sends me everything, so I get the links and I go and check it out. And it was of interest, but you know I couldn't see who was behind it, so that's a bit of a worry.
No, well you can't see the name of a
No.
human being on their website for love or money.
No, and
but
that
you're
is
not
very-
involved either with any of those other.
No.
What's ACT's problem?
Oh.
Let me be even more specific. Is it the leader?
Look, I think Rodney's got some issues. I mean, he made some bad decisions. He's very committed to the party, though. I mean, he's not going to walk away from it. And I think they've just, for some reason, the brand has been tainted, and they do a lot of hard work, but they don't gain the traction in the polls. I mean, I look at the work they did on the Foreshore and seabed, the work on the emissions trading scheme, but they're not gaining the poll ratings to actually show the effort that they put in. So it is a real problem for them. I don't really know what the answer is, but I do know that if they don't lift their game, then the centre-right is in trouble.
When you say the brand has been tainted, how?
I think it's a combination of poor decisions made by Rodney, that trip of course, but also the infighting. And, you know, to be fair, the infighting in ACT is historic. It was happening in my time as well, and whenever we went through a period where it was out in the public arena, then of course the party did dive actually in the polls. So it isn't anything new, and the thing about politics is that you know, they say a day is a long time in politics. Because we've now got a long time before the election, ACT does have a chance to rebuild itself.
Which
but
means
whether
it
it'll
has
be
to,
enough.
It would have to change the leader.
Well, no, it has a chance to rebrand itself, rebuild itself.
It could do that with Rodney at the helm, you're saying?
Well, I mean, look at Richard Prebble. He reinvented himself many times. When he went into Parliament with ACT, he said, I'm new in politics, and he'd had a very long career with the Labour Party. So you can reinvent yourself, you can sort things out in politics.
So
but
your
I don't know
message-
whether they will succeed or not. That's a separate issue.
If you were asked to go back into Parliament and to assume the leadership, would you be interested?
Oh, look, I've got a very nice life doing what I do. I think I make a big contribution. And having said that, you never say never about anything. You never ever close doors. I believe in life in general. But I can't see that happening. And as I say, I think I can make a big contribution doing what I do.
So for the foreseeable future, as far as you're concerned at the moment, that's what it will be, more of the same, more of the NZCPR newsletter?
More of the same. I am looking at a few other things though. One of the real concerns I have is the constitutional review. When we looked at the foreshore and seabed changes being proposed by National, everybody said this will never happen. It can't happen. It's so radical. They'd never do it. They did. And so I look at the constitutional changes that are being proposed by the Maori Party, and of course they want to enshrine the Maori seats, they want to put in the Treaty of Waitangi. I mean, I even heard the lady who's leading the iwi leaders constitutional change discussions talk about Bolivia as a good model for New Zealand. I mean, goodness me, if you've looked at the constitution for Bolivia, I mean, your hair would stand on end. So I think there are some real things we have to do to get involved in that debate right at the outset. Let
me draw your attention then, in conclusion, to the perfect constitution for New Zealand. And you can find it at www.freeradical.co.nz. It's called A Constitution for New Freeland. I had a part in writing it, and indeed I wrote the preamble in its entirety, and it's all you need.
Look,
and it protects individual rights from majority rule. You've seen it?
I did check it out.
Right. Print it out, send it out, because as I say, that would do it.
Yeah,
That's
but I think my point is I'm very nervous about a constitution. With the present sort of political situation, I think we would get something that would be worse for New Zealand. So in fact, and also of course the Constitution gives more power to judges, more interference by activist judges, and so I think we're probably better sticking with what we've got, Lindsay.
I will have to bring you back here on another occasion to dissuade you from that point of view, but for now, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
and all
you.
the best.
Really appreciated it.
Muriel Newman, and I'll be back with our romantic music gem of the week after this. My thanks again to Muriel Newman for being tonight's guest on Perigo. And so to this week's music gem from the Romantic era, courtesy of Marbex, who've kindly made available a copy of this week's featured CD to give away. To go into the draw and or comment on any aspect of tonight's program, email me, linz@lindsayperigo.com. Linz, L-I-N-Z, at lindsayperigo.com. Now, this is the CD, Tchaikovsky, Shakespeare. Gustavo Dudamel conducts the Simon Bolivar Symphony Orchestra of Venezuela in Fantasies by Tchaikovsky, based on 3 Shakespeare plays, Hamlet, The Tempest, and Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, of course, is the ultimate tale of the futility and stupidity of tribalism. One might wish Shakespeare had given it a different ending, but where would that have left Tchaikovsky, who did tragedy so much better than triumph? Till next time, for reason, freedom and excellence, I'm Lindsay Perigo. Good night.